Hey, it's Pops. I'm going to talk to you about the new Men in Black film, Men in Black International, the fourth film in the franchise. And there's been a lot of critics beating up on this film, so I want to break it down, tell you some of the positives and negatives, and you can decide if it's something you want to check out. Hey, I'm Brandon. This is Pops on Pop Culture. We break down different movies, different things like that. I'm going to talk to you about Men in Black International, the fourth film in the Men in Black series. So if you're new to the channel, if you like what you're seeing, hit the like button or subscribe and give us some feedback on what you think and don't think about the film. We're going to break it down a little bit for you because the film is actually a sequel and a reboot at the same time. In that, we get a whole new set of cast and characters and that kind of thing with nods to the original films. So it stars Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson. Sony brought in a new director with F. Gary Gray. He did Straight Outta Compton. He did the most recent Fast and the Furious film. He also did Friday. I think a lot of fans are really excited about having a new vision and a new person coming in and taking over for where Barry Levinson has started things with doing the first three films. So it would be good to bring in new energy, new direction, some new insights into the franchise and that kind of things. All right, so the film starts off with two origin stories. We see Liam Neeson and Chris Hemsworth as Agent T and Agent H, and they're in Paris battling this element called the Hive. And that's his first part of the story. We set him up with this big triumphant victory that sets the stage for him to be recognized as this great agent in the agency. Then we transition with a flashback to the 90s. We see an origin story for Molly. Molly becomes Agent M. That's Tessa Thompson's character. And we see her first instinct when she sees an alien is not repulsing or even fear, but love and admiration. She spends her whole life training for this moment because she sees her family get neuralized outside to cover the tracks of this alien showing up in her family back when she was a child. So we fast forward quickly through an interesting montage of scenes where she's applying for the FBI and the CIA. She's blowing away all these tests and all these pre-qualifiers, but she's secretly just trying to find the Men in Black because she was never recruited. So as we go through a little bit, Molly, who becomes Agent M, we see this in the trailer, right? She tracks down the Men in Black. She finds where they are. This is the America base camp for the MIB. Emma Thompson leads this group as Agent O, returning from the third film in charge of this branch of the MIB here in America. So it's very interesting to see that she probably would have been recruited because of her skill set. What's weird is how she comes in quickly and they move her on to this assignment. She gets a very kind of a trusting assignment very quickly out of the gate to unearth the situation in London. So she goes, and that's how she's going to end up crossing paths and becoming the partner ultimately with Chris Hemsworth's character, Agent H. Now, the Men in Black franchise has been built on some sort of little MacGuffin, right? This little item that doesn't mean anything. It's designed to move the story around. And each of the movies have that, and this one does as well. There's an assassination attempt on this creature, and it's a friend of Agent H from the past, so he's given that assignment to protect and get this, but we find out this little weapon, this little thing is there, and Agent M and Agent H are basically set out trying to figure out how to navigate what this thing is, what it does, who's trying to kill people for it, what they need to do to protect the Earth. So that's the basic premise of Men in Black International. All right, so what they do is they create a lot of tension in the air because Agent M has gone to London because secretly she's trying to discover if there's a mole or not. And we see Agent M and Agent H, they kind of get along, they kind of don't get along. And you try to see where does Agent H fit in the hierarchy of the London branch and different struggles and different turmoils with another agent there, Agent C. And we see that move along as well. So you have two or three different storylines that are going along. And at times the pacing works really well, and other times the pacing does not really work really well. I will say that I thought the beginning part of the film was one of the positives in that we get to see a little bit about Agent M, we get to see a little bit about Agent H. We don't get too bogged down with that, so that part moved along pretty well. The middle part gets a little discombobulated, and this villain that shows up is this controls matter creature thing from this hive. We don't really know too much about what its limitations and powers. We see little samplings of that. And then it basically becomes a chase movie where they're going after this weapon, this little thing that Agent M has, the MIB have and she has, and they're just trying to figure that out. So there's a lot of that. There are some really good moments between Hemsworth and Thompson. We saw them together in Thor Ragnarok. Their chemistry is fantastic. They're a high point in the movie. The movie kind of gets kind of sluggish at times. It kind of plods along a little bit. We see that these creatures have tried to kill other things and other organisms, and we ultimately get to introduce introducing of another little alien, kind of a replacement for Frank. If you remember the talking pug that was kind of a big hit in Men in Black and then ultimately become in Men in Black 2. And it's really kind of a big deal in the franchise was Frank as a sidekick, talking dog. So they replace Frank with Pawnee, and it's this little tiny thing. That's where a lot of the humor comes from. Pawnee is really a kind of a high point during that chapter, especially as this tension between Agent H and Agent M play out a little bit. We get to see if Agent H is going to come to grips with how he's different from the time they had the encounter in the very beginning of the movie, battling the Hive, and how he is now and how he is going forward. We think it's been a big hindrance in his character, and we see now that it's going to be the direction the film's trying to start with. How is he going to overcome that? And then Agent M is growing as an agent. She's trying to learn how to be an agent in the middle of this and thrust into this really deadly situation. Her life is at risk, and it ultimately comes together with some really cool alien fights and things like that before we have this big confrontation and this big twist near the end. So what is good and what is bad? As I said, what is good is the chemistry between Hemsworth and Thompson. It works really well. Emma Thompson's Agent O is one of the elements that was fantastic when she was on screen, right? She's the one that introduces all of the Men in Black rules, right? Put on the suit. They're not above the law. They're beyond the law. We don't exist. You're invisible. All those kinds of things. That all works great. We wish there's more of that. What doesn't work is the pace of the film. Like, this is a very high energy franchise with a lot of fun, a lot of humor, that kind of thing. Will Smith basically carried these films, and even in the worst moments, Men in Black 2 and 3 obviously are huge step downs from this first original film. And if you love the original film, we understand why you're still on board. I am. I have an unhealthy love of the Men in Black franchise because I do enjoy it so much. And even in its worst places, Will Smith's charisma and humor really carries the movies along. It's entertaining, right? Felt like Hemsworth and Thompson aren't really given enough free reign with that. To kind of, the banter goes and comes, but it's never as natural or as funny as Will Smith's is, and it kind of falls kind of flat. The special effects are amazing. The action sequences have good moments, but at the end of the day, it's all very discombobulated and kind of convoluted. This is why the critics are kind of bashing it. I think it's a pretty fair criticism in a lot of ways. The movie is basically a 6 on a scale of 10, kind of more like that 5 to 6 range, depending on how much of a fan you are of the franchise and science fiction. But if you're not, or if you're expecting a Men in Black 1, or you're expecting something really big, then you're probably going to be pretty disappointed. If you can tolerate a little bit, you want to go along for the ride, the movie's going to deliver for you, and it's worth something that you should see. So that's the general gist of the film, what I think is positive and negative about the film. I would like to get a little bit deeper into some of the spoilers and talk to you about what I think is really cool. It didn't take very long for someone at Sony to kind of leak out and talk to the press about what's really been going on behind the scenes of making this movie, how there's a lot of turmoil between the producer and the director. There actually was 2 cuts of the film that was actually screened. So this is really interesting drama to come out so quickly after a movie, to give the director cover, because the movie's not been well received, will be a financial flop, be a financial disaster, to be honest, for Sony. So stay with me if you want to dive into those spoilers. If not, we love your help and support for the network. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. Hope you enjoy Men in Black International, and if you do, check it out. Feel free to give me your positive, negative, what you think, what you didn't like. Well, that's your warning. We're going to go into some spoilers really quickly here. We're going to run down a few things in the film, what we like, what we don't like, what I think. I don't know. I was incredibly disappointed in the sense that I really want the reboot to do well. I really want more Men in Black films. I like Tessa Thompson. I like Chris Hemsworth. Hemsworth in particular has shown that he can really hold the camera, hold our attention, show us that he can really be funny and engaging. So in the first part of the movie, there's like, you know, he's kind of just an obnoxious, arrogant agent. He's allowed to be alone, which I thought was kind of like the point of the first 3 movies, is they weren't allowed to have agents working alone, but he is sort of alone. And I think the whole concept of the Men in Black universe basically turns upside down with this film. Like, they either didn't have a tight enough script, or they did so much editing they broke all of the rules in the Men in Black universe. And this was a huge negative for the diehard fans, right? So for instance, there's a big chase sequence to Marrakesh, and the agents are on this like alien motorcycle and they're racing through, and at one point they whip out the neuralizer and they're zapping a few people, but then that kind of stops. Like, she doesn't, Agent M's on the back of this bike zapping a few people, but then she doesn't keep doing that. So a couple people got neuralized, but not everybody got neuralized. So unlike the first couple movies where it seemed like we were going to try to keep all of this quiet and contained, this movie just kind of throws caution to the wind, man. It's really kind of weird that we don't really adhere to many rules at all in the Men in Black universe. So that was really one of the big negatives for the film, is we don't really even know where the rules are, what they're supposed to be and not be. And that really was kind of negative, because I think the audience kind of gets lost a little bit, because we're watching a scene in a moment where she will or won't neuralize somebody, and then you're like, well, is it supposed to neuralize that person or this person? And we don't really know what the rules are. I will say at the end of the day, the villain is completely a waste of time. Again, Hollywood's really having a hard time with villains lately. So they have the twins, and they play this creature, this organism of the hive, and it controls matter, and it's kind of weird and maybe interesting in some ways, but it just falls so flat in that there's no dialogue out of this character. There's no real banter about this character. There's no mocking of the character, right? This is Will Smith's brilliance, right? Is the banter with the roach, the bug. And that's all lost in this film. There's really no banter between the villain and the hero agent in this film. Pawnee is the best aspect of the banter in the film, playing the humor and the dialogue back and forth between the two characters, especially when they don't talk to each other and that kind of thing. So that part worked okay. The problem is Pawnee's around for a while before he even talks and engages all of that, and then Pawnee's kind of irrelevant, then he is relevant, right? Kind of part of the save the day moment involves Pawnee, which is kind of cool. That was okay. I really don't understand the fact that we didn't get any other characters introduced. So when we get to the end of the film and there's this big twist, right? We learn Liam Neeson's character is really the villain, and he's really behind all this, and he's manipulating everything. It's really a huge letdown, because there really aren't enough characters. Like, there was not enough of things introduced for the twist to work, right? So the villain being the villain, him being behind it, there's moments where that could have been set up a little bit better and a bit more entertaining, but because we run out of characters, we run out of options, basically all roads lead in the direction that we're going, we're really not shocked or surprised. It's all about whether or not Agent H, Chris Hemsworth's character, is going to be able to like find redemption, be able to help Agent T, and that twist doesn't work, but the scene is okay. The film tries to set up that there could be more films, but there's not going to be more films, in that Agent M and Agent H are not going to be together. He gets promoted, he's going to stay in London or Paris or wherever they end up, because at that point I'm actually a little confused, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be in London. And then in America, Agent M is going to go back. She's going to be officially an agent. And then there's a shot where she drives up. So they're not allowed to be together because they could care about one another. Yet earlier in the movie, we have no explanation of whatever happened to Agent M's parents. Like, so they're in this flashback sequence, and then she falls in love with this little alien thing. It's so cute. I love aliens. We should have aliens. But then she doesn't love anybody because she's going to become an agent. So we don't know what happened to her parents. That's just kind of this weird loose end that gets kind of thrown out there, and we're all supposed to kind of look past. So we have this illusion that we could get more films, but we don't really set up a believable landscape to have more films. I didn't care for that. So I really want to dive into now. I want to pull this up a little bit on screen, and you can see a little bit with me, because the Hollywood Reporter kind of has this report that kind of come out, and pretty interesting, the behind the scenes part with all of this. All right, so I want to dive a little bit into this behind the scenes thing that's been released now through the Hollywood Reporter, read you a little bit from the article, let you follow along and see the drama that's already surfacing. And I really do feel like that someone at Sony has leaked information to kind of give F. Gary Gray some cover, because the producer on the film is really blasted for his element. Now, the producer on the film is Walter Parks, and he's really kind of blasted in a passive aggressive way in this article to give cover to F. Gary Gray. And I think it's really interesting to see Sony is trying to figure out how to relaunch the franchise, right? They have decided that they're going to try to do Bad Boys 3, so that's going to involve Will Smith, so he can't do both. He's not going to be able to be free to do both. So they've got him on board with the Bad Boys 3, so he's not going to be part of this franchise. And that is a huge crime, by the way. They should have figured out a way for a cameo, bit part, something to give us something to connect it all together. It really been better that way. But they didn't do that. So the article really dives into all these different things about relaunching the franchise with new stars would lead to a battle between the director and the producer, and ultimately a crash landing at the box office. So they're saying that this conflict between Parks and Gray got so bad and so heated that basically this is one of the reasons that it failed. Like, the script was praised as being a good script. And why? Because, quote, the script had to be good in order to attract someone like Hemsworth and Thompson. And that's such a valid point, right? Because they're both coming off their partnership in Ragnarok, that chemistry. We see a little bit more of it in Endgame. They work together great. And this film that's actually the high point of the film. So the script starts off great, but then it seems like as we go through production, this producer-director conflict starts escalating, gets further and further out of control, and ultimately tears the situation apart. Parks, he's a veteran producer. He's known to be a partner with Spielberg, and they clashed with the vision on the film. And the article goes on and talks about the difference between the early drafts, how there was a villain. The villain was essentially like 4 characters, kind of like the Beatles, which I thought was an interesting reference. They all come together and form this one villain, this one super villain. And that's what they were going to face. Well, that's not what we saw in this film. So the article says that the sources say that at times Parks is actually basically acting as a director. They didn't break any of the rules with the union or anything like that, but it's to the point now where there's really incredible conflict. Gray tries to exit. Sony's not going to let him go. They're trying to convince him to stay. They actually produce and screen 2 different versions of the film. So I'm very interested to see. We're all under the impression with this article, this means that we saw Parks' version of the film. If there's a gray cut or a gray version, or there's a different version of this film, that's a huge saving grace. So if this gets released on Blu-ray, or we see some director's cut of this and it's a different film, that could really be a huge thing for Sony to kind of save the franchise. In these franchise-hungry days at studios, even failure like this won't kill the franchise. Executives agree, quote, "Aliens walking among us is the core of a great idea." And it alludes to the fact that immigration was a topic they were discussing, that kind of thing. So the film does have a lot of allegories and metaphors for today. I think that this is a franchise that has endless possibilities. And it was so exciting to see new ideas, new characters, new villains, with a new director and a new cast. And it just kind of fell pretty flat. Like I said, giving it a 6, kind of a lenient 6, probably more like a 5. I like the film in the sense that I can be entertained by it. Very clean. There's a few curse words, but nothing obligatorily out of line or anything profane. There's no nudity, anything like that. It's just a Men in Black film. It doesn't deserve to be rated R. It's PG-13. And it's entertaining. So some of your family can go see, that you guys can enjoy together as a family. But if you don't see it in the theater, catch it online on one of the streaming services. See if there's a director's cut or something like that. That might be worth checking out. And at the end of the day, we got some sort of version of the MIB. That was okay. I'll take it. So better than nothing. Tell me what you think. Leave me a comment. I try to respond to all those as fast as I can. But this is Pops.